Good morning, and it's January the 1st of 2022, so Happy New Year to you today, and blessings. Made it through a tough year this year, but we're still here. Some have been lost along the way, and we grieve them, but we give thanks to the Lord that His church, His bride, continues on, and we must continue to shine as lights in the darkness into this new year. We're going to stick with looking at the two ways. We looked at that early church document, that first century document of teachings, apostles' teachings. Not 100% sure where it came from, but it surely, what we read yesterday, lined up with the scriptures. For Matthew 7, 13 and 14, about entering by the narrow gate and the narrow way. Those are harder to find than the broad gate, the wide gate and the broad way, and that way leads to destruction, but the narrow way to life. We're going to listen to what C.S. Lewis has to say to us about this passage on this New Year's Day, first day of 2022. The ordinary idea which we all have before we become Christians is this. We take as starting point our ordinary self, with its various desires and interests. We then admit that something else, call it morality or decent behavior or the good of society, that something else has claims on this self, claims which interfere with its own desires. What we mean by being good is giving in to those claims. Some of the things the ordinary self wanted to do turn out to be what we call wrong, quote unquote. Well, we must give them up. Other things which the old self did not want to do turn out to be what we call, quote unquote, right. Well, we shall have to do them. But we are hoping all the time that when all the demands have been met, the poor natural self will still have some chance and some time to get on with its own life and do what it likes. In fact, we are very like an honest man paying his taxes. He pays them all right, but he does hope that there will be enough left over for him to live on, because we are still taking our natural self as the starting point. As long as we are thinking that way, one or other of two results is likely to follow. Either we give up trying to be good, or else we become very unhappy indeed. For make no mistake, if you are really going to try to meet all the demands made on the natural self, it will not have enough left over to live on. The more you obey your conscience, the more your conscience will demand of you. And your natural self, which is thus being starved and hampered and worried at every turn, will get angrier and angrier. In the end, you will either give up trying to be good, or else become one of those people who, as they say, quote unquote, live for others, but always in a discontented, grumbling way, always wondering why the others do not notice it more, and always making a martyr of yourself. Know way too many people like that in my life. And once you become that, you will be a far greater pest to anyone who has to live with you than you would have been if you remained, frankly, selfish. The Christian way is different, harder and easier. Christ says, give me all. He capitalizes the A there. Give me all. I don't want so much of your time and so much of your money and so much of your work. I want you. I have not come to torment your natural self, but to kill it. No half measures are any good. I don't want to cut off a branch here and a branch there. I want to have the whole tree down. I don't want to drill the tooth or crowd it or stop it, but to have it out. Hand over the whole natural self, all the desires which you think innocent as well as the ones you think wicked, the whole outfit. I will give you a new self instead. In fact, I will give you myself. My own will shall become yours. Both harder and easier than what we are all trying to do. You have noticed, I expect, that Christ himself sometimes described the Christian way as very hard, sometimes as very easy. He says, take up your cross. In other words, it is like going to be beaten to death in a concentration camp. Next minute he says, my yoke is easy and my burden light. He means both, and one can just see why both are true. Teachers will tell you that the laziest student in the class is the one who works hardest in the end. Laziness means more work in the long run. Or look at it this way, in a battle or in mountain climbing, there is often one thing which it takes a lot of pluck to do, but it is also in the long run the safest thing to do. If you flunk out on it, you will find yourself hours later in far worse danger. The cowardly thing is also the most dangerous thing. It is like that here. The terrible thing, the almost impossible thing, is to hand over your whole self, all your wishes and precautions to Christ. But it is far easier than what we are all trying to do instead. For what we are trying to do is to remain what we call, quote-unquote, ourselves. To keep personal happiness as our great aim in life, and yet at the same time be good, quote-unquote. We're all trying to let our mind and heart go their own way, centered on money or pleasure or ambition, and hoping, in spite of this, to behave honestly and chastely and humbly. And that is exactly what Christ warned us you should not do. That is why the real problem of the Christian life comes where people do not usually look for it. It comes the very moment you wake up each morning. All your wishes and hopes for the day rush at you like wild animals, and the first job each morning consists simply in shoving them all back, in listening to that other voice, taking that other point of view, letting that other, larger, stronger, quieter life come flowing in. And so on all day. Standing back from all your natural fussings and frettings, coming in out of the wind. We can only do it for moments at first, but from those moments the new sort of life will be spreading through our system, because now we are letting Christ work at the right part of us. It is the difference between paint which is merely laid on the surface and a dye or stain which soaks right through. He never talked vague, idealistic gas. When he said be perfect, he meant it. He meant that we must go in for the full treatment. It is hard, but the sort of compromise we are all hankering after is harder. In fact, it is impossible. Hard and yet easy. It's a mystery, the mystery of the kingdom, that somehow the hardest thing to do turns out for the best result. To give up ourselves completely to the Lord Jesus Christ. Take up that cross daily and die to self instead of trying to play the compromise game. Eventually, as Jesus would say in another passage we've looked at, you will hate one of those masters in the end. You can't have it both ways. In the end, it is best to give it all up to Christ and let him call the shots in life, as it were. I pray that'll be our goal in this new year. I pray that it is our desire to give it all to the Lord Jesus Christ. Let him have his way in all things and stop trying to just live for ourselves or insert living for ourselves, which you can't do if you've given up your whole self to Christ. Blessings to you today on this first day of 2022.